We have it. So you all should be able to see our excellent panelists today. I am so excited to welcome you to M&A New Tools and Processes so that compliance is an enhancement to any deal. Today, leading our conversation is Stacey Frinkle, partner at Morrison & Forrester. She is joined by Nancy Krantz, who is the Vice President and Chief Counsel for Innovation, Digital, and Technology at Eaton Corporation. And also joining them is Ben Bard, Vice President, Global Chief Compliance Officer, and Head of Global Security at ADM. Stacey, the floor is all yours to kick things off.
Great. Thanks so much, Chelsea. Thanks, Nancy and Ben, for being here with me today. I'm really looking forward to this conversation and to getting insight from both of you, because I know you have a ton of experience in this area. But first, to give some context, I'm hoping that each of you can talk a little bit about, give a little background on the organizations that you're with, your teams, and the extent to which you've been involved in M&A activities. So Ben, maybe I can kick it to you first.
Sure. Yeah. Thanks, Stacey. Pleasure to be with you today. So so as head of compliance at ADM, I lead a team that's involved in running the global compliance program, but also with working for a company that is involved in a lot of M&A activity. Our compliance program has had to contemplate and expand to include M&A due diligence, M&A integration, as part of our sort of core disciplines, sort of the baseline blocking and tackling of our program. So our team is global. We have folks positioned around the world. And as we think about how we're best going to support the company, it's not just the current book of business, our current business model. It's also how the company is growing and emerging in emerging markets, emerging our business lines around the world. So I lead that team, our compliance team, and I've made sure that our team, as we think about our core discipline areas, that we include M&A work as part of that portfolio.
Great. And Nancy, how about you?
Hi, Stacey. I got kicked out for a minute. Would you mind repeating the question?
Yeah, no, I was just asking for you to provide a little bit of context about your own role, your organization, and your team, and the extent to which you've been involved in M&A activity, which I know is quite extensive.
Yes, absolutely. So I am proud to be here on behalf of Eaton Corporation today, which is a very big global multinational. We've been very acquisitive over the years. We've done, just by way of reference, over 120 acquisitions and divestitures just since 2000. And so we've been very busy in this space. I recently transitioned out of the head of global ethics and compliance here at Eaton. I'm in a new role leading our innovation, digital, and technology team. But we were heavily involved in the M&A processes, from compliance, having a seat at the table at due diligence, ensuring that our entire global team sort of had a seat at the table, being able to participate in those compliance due diligence interviews prior to reviewing documents and data rooms. I mean, everything that you would, and I'm sure a lot of the folks on this call today are involved in. And so we are really excited to be here with all of you today and to share some knowledge and hear from all of you.
Excellent, excellent. Well, so I'm curious from your perspective, and I've seen a lot. So just for a little context, I lead MoFo's global ethics and compliance practice. So I've worked on probably, I don't know, maybe upwards of 200 deals over the past decade. And it really varies. I see compliance teams being brought in at the very, very early moments of when a deal is being considered. And there's not even, maybe a term sheet or any definitive plan to complete a merger or an acquisition. And then I've seen things where compliance teams are brought in kind of late when an issue has already maybe been identified and you're playing catch up. I'm curious from your perspectives, how early in the process are you generally looped in, and how do you ensure that you've got a seat at the table and that you're not being brought in at the very last minute?
Ben, if it's okay, maybe I'll just kind of kick us off here. We're brought in very early in the process, at the same time that I think our entire legal team is brought in after our M&A team has been apprised of the details of the deal. And so we'll gather as a legal team. We'll ensure that we sort of hear that presentation from the target, wherever it is, understand how they go to market. What's their business look like? What sort of products do they manufacture? And then we collaborate as a legal team on what we think the big key legal risks might be, And then we start to delineate and delegate responsibilities. We, from an ethics and compliance perspective, have a playbook and very specific checklists that we follow. And so we understand what track we're running. But it's really important, I think, from a project management standpoint, that you really set those ground rules early in the deal. So number one, it's more efficient that way. Everyone knows what they're supposed to be working on. You ensure that all the trains are moving on time. There's not a lot of time involved in this, right? Some of these deals have very short time spans, and so your deadlines, especially from a compliance perspective, when you have to screen third parties, can be short. And so by doing that, by ensuring that we're brought in very early in the process, ensures that we have the amount of time that we need to complete diligence in those processes, and then also to be able to collaborate with some of our other colleagues to get the information that we need.
Great. And Ben, similar for you?
Yeah, really similar, Stacy. I think maybe a couple things I would add to what Nancy said are that first, we think of our M&A, our business development team, as we call them at ADM. We think of those folks who are leading those projects, who are finding those deals and pursuing them in a project management capacity. We view them as like any other stakeholder at the company. In compliance, you're focused on building relationships, supporting the business however you can. And we view them as a corporate function, or in some cases as a regional team, as another key client and stakeholder who we need to get close to. So we spend time with them, we train them on the things that we care about and are concerned about that we think are relevant to their shop and how they operate. And I think that pays dividends down the road. That helps us that when a deal does reaches sufficient ripeness or is appropriate to share, we're early in that process. We're thought of early. The second thing that has helped us, I think, is how we've approached third-party risk management at the company. So when we talk about third-party due diligence, we're not just talking about it with the frontline person who's engaging a government-facing vendor or some other high-risk category, like someone in a trade sanction, a country subject to U.S. trade sanctions. We're looking at this more holistically. And so the more awareness I have found that you raise about due diligence and how sort of the width and breadth of what due diligence can mean to the company and the value it can provide, I think the folks across the company, including those leading projects, leading deals, evaluating targets, are more likely to reach out to you early in the process because they don't want to have to have a showstopper at the wrong time, right? If this is someone we can vet early, if there's a target, their management, their principals earlier in the process, that's value added to their project efforts.
Yeah, I think that relationship building is so important too, because if they see you truly as a partner in the process, I think it's a lot easier to get buy-in to accomplish the things that you're hoping to accomplish. So I want to dig in a little bit here. As we know, not all deals are created equal from a risk perspective. And frankly, I think it's probably the rare instance where you're where companies are able to get as much information and do as much diligence as in an ideal world they would like to, whether it's for legal reasons or, you don't have enough leverage with a target, or maybe you just don't have enough time. As Nancy was saying, a lot of these deals are, very quick. I'm curious, I know you guys have both had a lot of experience and we're already getting comments and questions about tools and resources. I want to talk a little bit about how you identify risks and the different tools and resources that you use to ensure consistency or some level of a consistent approach across deals that are so varied in terms of size and risk and complexity. So I don't know, Ben, you want to jump in on that one first?
Sure. Yeah, sure. And it goes back to something Nancy said before, which is having a playbook really helps here. And the playbook isn't a fancy piece of technology, but it could be a common platform, a common framework about how we approach deals. So it sounds like our program is very similar. Our approach is very similar to Nancy's approach in that the company has an M&A playbook, a playbook that governs how we think about transactions and potential deals. Well, we've created sort of a child or sister product to that, which is our ethics compliance due diligence playbook. And we lean on that, right? So it certainly ties in. It's got similar lexicon. It's got similar structure. How we risk rank things looks and feels familiar to the business development team and other functional work streams who have a role to play in our overall M&A framework. And so we follow our playbook. and our playbook is designed to be sort of all inclusive. Not every deal, as you correctly say, Stacy, are equal. Some are small, some are large. Some you have access to data, some you have less access to data. Some there's virtual data rooms. Some there's just Q&A that have to be thrown over the transom to the target. Sometimes you get answers, sometimes you don't. So our playbook, our compliance playbook, anticipates sort of the full landscape of what M&A due diligence could be, and we tailor that for the transaction. One of the things that I think has been helps us be successful in doing due diligence, and we try and after every deal do a look back, a post-mortem, what lessons learned, how can we improve this, is that continuous improvement cycle. We try and do that with every deal. Certainly there's more learnings on some deals than others, but one of the keys to our success has been to demonstrate not only to the target, but to our clients inside the company who are working on these, as functional work streams in our playbook, is that we're not so rigid in a one size fits all. We do appreciate that not all deals are created equal. And the more precise, the more targeted you are in your questioning or in your request to the client or to the project team, I think it lends to a better result and an opportunity to be to leverage the standard approach you want to take, but to be nimble enough to target your work to address the particular deal at hand.
Yeah, I agree with you, Ben, and you made some really excellent points. And some of the kind of a key theme that you might be hearing here, and something that I'll probably mention several times during the course of our time together, is it really starts with the education of your own E&C team at home, right? And so as you're thinking about, especially those of you that come from companies that might be multidisciplined, segmented in very different ways, operating in different global jurisdictions, you really are going to have to get your team smart on the business itself. How do they go to market? What, as I said at the beginning, what are their different products and innovations? As we think about assessing risk, in compliance, sometimes we can be pretty siloed on our work streams. Well, we're going to screen the third parties, and we're going to review the ethics code, and we're going to ask them about their gift and entertainment practices. And you may be missing a whole different layer of risk depending on how that business operates. B2C, B2B, do they have an extensive channel? Are they family owned? And so starting with that education on your team early with we call them our corporate development and planning team, similar to what Ben mentioned with their business development team, scheduling time ahead of when a deal is on your plate to really dig deep on the company strategies and what they're looking at really helps you to better position yourself to be ready to understand what that risk profile might ultimately be. And then you can tailor all of the great things that Ben was talking about with respect to your playbooks and your checklists and the questions that you might ask that target company, which might be very, very different depending on the profile.
No, absolutely. I mean, one mistake that I've seen companies make is having a playbook, but then feeling the need to follow it rigidly in every transaction when, some transactions are inherently much lower risk than other transactions. I'm curious whether in your playbook or otherwise, how do you guys do that initial risk assessment? So a deal comes in, do you have like a scorecard or a series of questions you ask? How do you quickly come up with a process to sort of risk rank the deal, if you will, and figure out, what's our approach going to be here? How much do we need? Obviously, knowing that something could come up down the line, which completely alters your view of the risk profile. But what's your approach?
I'll start, Nancy, then you can complement what I say. I think there are, this is maybe not a perfect answer, Stacy, but one of the things that helps us is muscle memory. So we don't have everyone in our department handling M&A transactions. We have a core set of folks who are skilled and trained and have been doing this for a while. I think that creates a muscle memory that you kind of know your way around the playbook, so to speak, and you kind of have a sense as to what questions to ask and how to tailor the assessment to the needs of the deal. But nothing replaces having a conversation or being part of the deal team to understand what does the target do? What is their line of business? What are the products? who are their customers, what is their reliance on third parties, all of those things. We don't have a, like a drop-down list where if it's this type of business, only these questions apply. So it's a bit of art and science, it's a bit of feel, but I think it comes from experience. And I think some of the folks on our team who are more experienced in the M&A space are sharing that expertise with others. And so one of the ways that we had tried to pass along that knowledge is through centers of excellence. So we have practice areas within compliance, and we've identified key risk areas or key practice areas. And one area is M&A. And so as we think about mergers and acquisitions and joint ventures and divestitures, we have a practice area of a group of people from across our team that are sharing learnings, talking about deals, continuously improving the process. And I think that focus has helped us and makes a difference when we think about right sizing the diligence requirements and the post-close implementation plans and all the things that come with M&A work.
Yeah, similar to what Ben mentioned, we have hesitated using any sort of a tool or a matrix or a heat map even to risk rank these types of deals over the years. We've debated it. We've thought about whether or not that would make sense for us. But ultimately, depending on how your particular company may choose to operate, but rarely does a deal make it to us, right, to the point where we're getting the lawyers involved and we're sort of, full scale on diligence, where there's kind of a non-starter on the table, where we're looking at criminal liability, where we're looking at a company that's been through, had some significant scandal, for example. I just don't, like I said, historically, that really hasn't made it to our plate. It wouldn't be something that we likely would be interested in. But by the time it makes it to us, I think that I'm going to go back to my learning comment, Stacy, that I made very early on, having your team understand valuation and what that means. And so you may find something during the course of diligence. You may find something that may trigger perhaps a significant investigation where you may say, it's a factor in assessing the risk. But think about how much people time, resources, monetary resources, these tend to be expensive when you have to hire outside counsel perhaps to help you manage through this particular investigation. You need to be able to, from a risk perspective, identify those earlies, plug them into the valuation model so that all of these smart and sophisticated BD, business development or corporate development and planning teams can then adjust the valuation model and pay less for that particular entity, depending on those risk factors that you input into the model, which is why I say, again, the more sophisticated your own teams can become in understanding what goes into the overall risk model, not just from an E&C perspective, the better.
That makes sense. I think a lot of what you're saying too also comes back to just building those relationships early with your corporate development or business development team and having them have the faith and trust in you that they don't need to see, that scorecard or that matrix. They know that you understand the business and that you understand what they're trying to accomplish, and they trust your, instincts on how to handle a given deal. So I think that becomes all the more important. In addition to variability around risk, in my experience, there's a great deal of variability. Ben was mentioning this before, and how much information you can actually get from a target. And, sometimes it might be that there are other significant issues in a deal that are, and perhaps rightly so, much more of an area of focus where the deal team wants to use their leverage, or maybe there are legal reasons why you can't get access to information, or you have, a target that is really hesitant to give you information, or maybe it's a more hostile situation. So how do you deal with the situation where you really can't get enough information at the time of diligence to make a meaningful assessment? Do you have an approach to dealing with that, like a post-close audit, or dealing with it through deal terms? What's your thinking around this? Nancy, you want to go first on this one?
Sure. I think two of the things. One that you mentioned already, and that is ensuring that you're building in enough protections into the purchase agreement, whatever might be a stock purchase agreement, asset purchase agreement, however you're contracting with that particular company, whether it be through, particular warranty provisions, indemnity provisions. And so building those all up front so that you're ensuring that the company is protected in the event that you find out something after the deal closes that you now are going to be responsible for. I would think, first and foremost, that's how we deal with it here. And look, we all have the advantage, I think, of living in the age of the internet. And there's a lot that you can find out through public filings, through searching various records online, and frankly, the due diligence systems, whether it be, like Ben mentioned, it doesn't even have to be your third-party compliance due diligence systems. We have all sorts of vendor screening tools that we use from a supply chain perspective. There are a number of them out there where you can find out all sorts of information about various companies. And so we use those external sources too to canvas what we can and kind of create that picture behind the scenes.
And I'll add that the relative amount of information you have pre-close can be a strong factor in how you design your post-close integration plans. So, I would say the less comfortable we are before the deal closes about access to data and the fullness of the data that we ordinarily would want to review, the more urgent we feel, the more time sensitive we feel it is to get to the target post-close, whether that's day one, week one. It highlights the importance of doing a post-close risk assessment as a continuation of the diligence that you were trying to do pre-close. So, and I personally have a belief that you get information pre-close, you use that to inform your corporate development team, and you make best efforts up front. But where our efforts really make ultimate difference is how well we validate what we learned pre-close. There's always an opportunity to get more data, even of the things that you thought you had access to pre-close. This gets to your question, Stacy, where I think you have access to data and you're relieved that, okay, this target's going to allow us to know this piece of information, but you still have to. I'm a big believer you've got to go and validate that after close, right? And the sooner you can get your boots on the ground, the sooner that you can understand what you bought, the sooner you can implement the program that you know, or you will learn the extent to which it needs to be integrated or harmonized or built from scratch. There are always, which is why I think it's important to do a post-mortem, because I think there's always an opportunity after the deal to look back, even post, not just pre-close, but post-close, when the deal is closed or when a deal has been abandoned for one reason or another. Is there anything we could or should do differently? And that includes the after-close risk assessment, because so much that it's such precious time in the early days after a deal, your first and maybe only opportunity to visit that target for some time. It's really important that risk assessment after the close is as informed and thorough as possible, because there's such a thing as, success or liability. You've now bought something, and it's important to make best efforts on the integration side after the deal closes.
Right. I mean, and not to mention the fact that once you own it, you own it. There's no reason to think that whatever was going wrong before is stopped all of a sudden. So I totally agree. I have so many questions flowing from what both of you just said, but I think, one thing I'm curious about, talking about sort of the post-mortem and the post-close risk assessment, one thing that I've seen a lot of, and of course, I'm not in-house, so I don't see that perspective, but I've seen a lot of times, we'll spend a lot of time working on diligence on a deal. We'll interview multiple people. There will be a lot of information that comes out of it. But ultimately, the work product might be, a few bullet points in a deck that's being presented to those that are deciding whether to go forward with the transaction, or maybe it's just a list of the, red flags or even yellow flags that you found. What's your process for making sure that you guys are really benefiting from all of those learnings that are happening during the diligence, so that you can, make sure that you've got the benefit of those things for your postmortem or for your post-close risk assessment, or as you're thinking about integration and mitigating the risks that were actually identified, so that those learnings aren't lost?
Yeah, similar to what Ben just shared, I think it's really important as you think about your own team We do a similar lessons learned session after every deal internal to with the big law team. So, everyone that's participating, our IP lawyers, our M&A lawyers, our antitrust counsel, to go through what could we have done better? Where should we have dug in maybe a little deeper? Where could we have pulled back? And so we update all of our playbooks based on those learnings. Also, we have a monthly cadence here in ethics and compliance where we meet every single month and we sort of go through what's everybody working on, right? And through those sessions, we always talk about lessons learned. And so it's this continuous, as Ben mentioned, this continuous feedback loop cycle of, going through that. Similar to what you mentioned, Stacy, we have a legal due diligence memo. And that memo is updated weekly with learnings, right? So separate and apart from our trackers that we keep, as I mentioned earlier, with all of the action items that everyone's working on and they're color coded and names assigned to them, you have to put all of your learnings into this legal diligence memo that gets communicated to our leadership teams. And so, again, trying to figure out from an executive perspective, what does our chief legal officer, what does our CEO, what does our CFO need to know about the non-starters of this deal? And similar to what Ben mentioned, this is on judgment, it's on experience, which is why your teams need to be trained to figure out what those items are so that when you put it in that memo, it's good to go, right? Because the rest is on you after the fact. And so you as a team need to know, what risks am I going to be willing to live with post-close? How much work is my team going to be willing to undertake to integrate this new business, to show up on site? Do I have the right resources in those in India, for example, to manage, now the 30,000 employees that we're inheriting there and ensuring that our code is deployed and I can, deploy all of our, investigatory processes there. So that would be what I would say from our perspective.
And I'll add that I think your whatever tool or framework you're using to record your findings, your due diligence results, the answers to the questions you have, the things you've reviewed in a data room, whatever you're using to track that, whether it's an Excel spreadsheet or a Word document or a tool, I think it's important to risk rank those, or at least to if you have a prioritization structure, so that if there's things that need to make their way to the business development team because they are the go, no go triggers, those are flagged. But there always are lots of things that are going to be housekeeping things that compliance is going to need to follow back up on. We're going to need to tidy that up. We're going to need a clarification on this. We're going to need to circle back. You don't want to lose those things. And so those may be lower priority on the overall priority scale, but are important to your team. And I think if you stay true to that workbook that you're using on this deal, you'll make sure you circle back to those. And then good project management skills come into play there, just to make sure you're following through on the things that you found. You then now have a much more robust document, not maybe the 3 bullet point or summary information that went to your executives making the call on the deal, but you've got an inside playbook for your team that's going to help shape what you're going to do post-close, or what are the things that we need to circle back on without dropping the ball. And I think for us, that's only possible because we've got really good people, right? We've got people who are diligent, who are committed to these deals, and the expectation is really full circle. The things that we may find in ethics compliance may actually be valuable to our finance team. It may be valuable to our procurement folks, may be valuable to the supply chain folks. And so if you have a mechanism in your tracker to catch things that are not only relevant to you, but that may be useful to somebody else, you're less likely to have right hand doesn't know what the left hand is doing situation. And so capturing those things and then sharing them with the people who need it, I think, is a good practice to follow.
Yeah, no, that all makes sense. It resonates. One thing I think you guys are both really fortunate is that you've got, these teams with resources that have deep experience in this area. One thing that I see is some companies, actually, the people that are responsible for integration, even compliance-related integration, might be different people than the team that's actually been working on the compliance diligence. And that's where having a tracker along the lines of what you were just mentioning, Ben, some sort comes in handy. Another little piece of advice that I'll give is that, Nancy and Ben obviously have internal teams that are, heavily involved. I don't know if they're doing it all themselves or if they're just heavily involved, but it's clearly the case that they're very involved. If you have a smaller team and you're leveraging outside counsel, I recommend that you have some kind of standard approach to a tracker or something that you have your outside counsel keeping for you, especially if you're using different outside counsel on different deals, because you're really going to benefit. If we're doing diligence on a deal, we're absolutely keeping that kind of a tracker and making sure that, we're keeping track of everything we find and make sure that we're able to feed it to our clients in an appropriate way, but make sure that you're getting the benefit of that and that you're getting it in a consistent way so that you have a mechanism to really benefit from the work that they're doing. I want to go back a little bit to what we were talking about before, where you've got variability on risk and access to imperfect information. And one of the things that I think people really struggle with is just this question of, how do I get comfortable with the imperfect? How I know I'm not doing everything, right? And even if I have done everything that I think is everything I could possibly do, there's no guarantee that I've caught that issue or that problem. What's your perspective on just getting comfortable with a certain level of risk that's inherent in this process?
And start with this one?
Yeah, I'll just say something short and sweet and let you fill in the gaps, Nancy, or the large gaps. We talked about this on our prep call, and it's hard to be comfortable with the uncomfortable. But these deals are when you're going through a deal process, you never have access to all the information you want. But there's gradations there, right? So there's things that we are must-haves or things that we feel like are more important to have than others. And where it can get complicated is if a company has no compliance program at all. It may be a family-owned business or not a multinational company, and it practices in a way that reflects local custom, or which may include lack of enforcement of law, lack of understanding of law, poor rule of law. And so this is where I think some of the discomfort comes from, is the great unknown, where we see this business, we trust the financials, we see the opportunity, but there is not an existing compliance program, or there's not a lot of documentation about available to us pre-close. And that's where I think we need to be transparent with our teams, the decision makers, about valuation as best we can, that there is a big question mark here, and we will do our level best post-close to be careful and thoughtful and time sensitive to try and understand what we may be bumping into, what surprises we may find. But at the end of the day, this is a bit of a mystery journey, and you are unpacking and discovering and learning. And that's part of the excitement of the M&A effort. From a compliance perspective in particular, is how do we navigate from what we know to how we are growing as a company. And that always comes with surprises. And I think we need to migrate from the thought that generates fear and concern to we're helping the business grow. We are a support engine. We are a business enabler. How can we help the company grow in a responsible way? And so getting comfortable with that discomfort is a mindset.
Yeah, I think you're right about that, Ben. There's just no perfect scripted answer with this. You're always going to be a bit uncomfortable with it, right? But ultimately, I think this is going to rest on the strength of your program. So the more your repeatable processes that you have in your existing compliance program, the better. It's just so much easier than to lift and shift whatever that is and pass that on to that acquired company. At Eaton, we're what we call an integrated operated company, right? So we have sort of a model where we don't have this holding company model where entities operate differently. We use sort of the same performance review system. We have the same ethics code deployed through our company. And so the expectation is, again, it's going to be the same with everything that you're now going to do. It's probably all going to change. And actually, we've actually found in our experience, sometimes acquiring companies that don't have anything at all might be a bit easier, okay? Because you're not undoing bad habits per se. You're just kind of, deploying your standard program, and this is the new program, and it is what it is. I think ultimately, as you think through integration and sort of what you're stuck with that acquired company, you got to go get to the heart of what the culture is, right? Do they ultimately have a culture of compliance? Asking those key questions of those business leaders and that second and third tier down about how they operate, how do they interact with those third parties, and you can really get, taking a look, if you have the ability to do that post-close, at those investigation reports that they've done historically over the past 2 years. You can get a really good feel for that culture of compliance and really understand whether or not the receptivity of the new compliance program, whatever it is, how well that will be received at the new entity.
And I'll add one more quick comment there, which is, I think if we think back to what our your third grade math teacher taught you when you were doing multiplication and division, it's show your work. And what helps me sleep at night or feel better about the great unknown is the fact that we've documented a good faith effort, right? We've done all the right things. We've asked the right questions. We maybe didn't get all the answers we wanted. It's an imperfect process, but we've got a project plan. We treat this seriously. We're responsible, and that ability to demonstrate the sort of the reasonable efforts is only possible if you document all the work you do. So a commitment to our process is really key to getting comfortable.
Yeah, no, I was going to say the same thing. I mean, I think it's an ancillary benefit of having the playbooks and the trackers and the processes and the general approach is that you have that to fall back on and to point to, and you can show all of the efforts that you made and how, consistent and strong your program is overall. It's not, it's never going to be perfect in any deal, I think. I'm curious on, Nancy, you were talking earlier about deal terms. How involved do your teams get in deal terms? And do you have the ability, I'm sure you're always putting in, reps and warranties, addressing specific compliance risks, but do you get involved in conversations around things like indemnities and escrows and different, conditions to close or different sort of deal term strategies that particularly, if something that has come up might affect the valuation of the deal, or if there's an issue that you haven't been able to fully vet prior to close?
Yes, absolutely. Our M&A lawyers largely drive and lead that conversation. They're very sophisticated. They sort of own the agreement, right? And then they'll bring us in various pieces of the agreement. But we operate in a pretty collaborative environment here at Eaton, where that's posted on a team site or a shared network. And so you'll see those red lines going back and forth. And again, in our tracker, you can look on there and say, okay, Nancy, you're responsible for the anti-corruption section. I need your comments on the data privacy section. And so you're building in those provisions and ensuring, based on the risk profile that you've already diligenced, I'm responsible for that piece of the agreement. Right? And so our M&A lawyers really rely on all of us subject matter experts to go in and make those edits, which is why, again, really important that you don't wait until the deal is pending to figure out what those terms are or what they should be. So part of your playbook should have a series of terms from a compliance perspective, anti-corruption, data privacy, all of the other areas that you cover, which a lot of us now in compliance also cover regulatory. So we're looking at things like the Committee on Foreign Investment in the U.S., right? CFIUS. So if you're an international company, you're worried about CFIUS approvals. And so you're building all of that into the timeline, and so that you can insert some of those deals. You also need to be, the terms of the transaction and what goes into that purchase agreement is also different depending on the nature of that company you're acquiring. So let's say you're acquiring a big US government contractor. Well, now you're concerned about classified information and whether or not, right, what those agents and distributors look like, because now you're dealing with government entities. And so again, having all of that built into your processes ahead of time, so when time is tight, you're not reinventing the wheel. You're pulling them through, you're adjusting based on the risk profile. That would be my advice on that.
100%. I have nothing to add. That's exactly our approach, and Nancy said it very well.
Great. Well, I'm curious, moving a little bit over to the integration side. And Ben, I'm going to throw this one at you because from our prep, I know you have some interesting thoughts about this, but how do you get the business to prioritize compliance integration? Ben, I think it was you earlier that was talking about how, depending on lack of access to information or what you learn also kind of, tells you how soon you need to get in there. But how do you get the business to make compliance integration a priority when there are obviously so many different, business related priorities and other things that need to get done once a deal closes?
Yeah, great question, and really important topic. This goes back to what Nancy said about the culture and the values your company has, the policies and programs your company has, your company's commitment to doing the right thing, to following the law. That all I think lends itself to being part of that day one experience for that newly acquired company or even that joint venture. Letting those folks know that on day one, they're not only going to hear from the acquiring company, but they're going to receive a code of conduct. And that code of conduct is going to have a welcome letter from maybe our CEO or our business unit president overseeing that business, or from myself or some other senior person. And so the sooner that you communicate the importance of what you hold near and dear, what your company's values are, you can start to embed your culture with that company. And obviously what can come from that afterwards is harmonization of policies and understanding of the, through the risk assessment of how that company really operates, what they value, or do they have a safety culture, do they have a compliance culture, and so forth. Those are things that you would learn only upon arrival, frankly. And so what we have done is we've, at ADM, and I imagine it's similar to other companies, we're sensitive about not disrupting the business we've acquired, right? We acquired a company because it's profitable or it's got a great opportunity and because it's successful. And so you don't want to be inundating and disrupting that business with visitors and a not a very thoughtful or considerate cadence of visitors from ADM or from the acquiring company. So we have offered and been able to carry the flag for other corporate functions when we do go on site. So maybe it's somebody from my regional team, or maybe it is somebody from another function, and they will either carry the flag for compliance and speak on our behalf as part of town hall or a training session, or breakout meetings with different shifts or different members of management. And we will do the same for those functions. So you can't have all your finance people there, all your HR people there, all your compliance and safety and procurement and sustainability people. But you can certainly say one of us is going, or maybe a couple of us, or two of us will go. What are all the things that we want to build into what would be a really timely and robust orientation type of training session and follow on risk assessment? And so that's been our approach, and it's been well received, and it's enabled us to, I think, make better progress earlier post-close than we otherwise would if we were all waiting for our opportunity to go and travel and visit. So carrying the flag for others and taking a holistic view to the strategy for those who are on site early on, I think is a great approach to take.
Yeah, I agree with Ben. Getting to that welcome day and carrying the flag, whatever it might be, whether it be someone from your own E&C team or someone else in another function, really is critical. All of our welcome day standard messages contain language about how important it is to do business right and what our expectations are, and that we expect, they lead with saying And you will have to do your 1 hour of ethics training before the end of the year. And so we'll be in touch soon. But I think, we appoint integration teams to all of our newly acquired businesses, and an ethics and compliance person will sit on that integration team. And of course, they'll follow the integration framework document. And so there are a series of things, of items that newly acquired business will have to accomplish in the first 30, 60, 90 days. And so we've just made that sort of part of the framework such that they can't move to the next step unless they've completed those action items, and we work alongside with them. But we found the HR community to be such a helpful partner during integration from an ethics perspective. So we make friends with them very early, and obviously, build those relationships are really key so they can help us get that message out early.
That makes a lot of sense. HR is a key partner in so many ways for ethics and compliance. I only have time for one more question. I'm going to ask it quickly, which is around training your actual M&A or your corporate development, your business development teams. You guys have spoken a lot about how much time your team spends learning from them about strategy and targets and what, where the company's headed from a growth perspective. What about the flip side? What kind of training do you provide? How much time do you spend with them so that, say there's a deal that you've initially assessed as pretty low risk and something comes up that's significant in the course of it? Do you have confidence that, that someone's going to catch that and bring you in? How do you make sure that they are kind of keyed in on the red flags and the things that you're looking for, and that you've got, that you have faith that it will be escalated?
Yeah, I'll go first, Nancy. I think there's formal and there's informal training. So I think there's formal training, and I think there's awareness building. Whenever we have someone who's joining a business development team, either in a region or at corporate, we will sit down with them and we will talk to them about what we do in compliance and what role and partnership we can play with them. And I think that can raise awareness of the things to look for. Over time, you have that relationship to lean on. But they're also obviously subject to our enterprise training that we would provide on a number of topics. But I think it is good practice to sit down with different functions. How you're going to talk about compliance to your auditors, your finance teams, it may be different than how you talk to your tax teams, how you would talk to supply chain and procurement on topics and risk areas that you want to raise their awareness about. And the BD team, the corporate development team, is a unique and important team to be spending time with, because just as you said, any number of things are going to come across their desk, and you want to make sure that they have the right magnifying glass to spot those red flags. And before I throw it to Nancy, I'll just add is that one other thing that you can do in the context of that conversation or those trainings, formal or informal with them, is to talk to them about the value of the compliance program. Because the valuation discussion is an area where I think that there's an opportunity for many more functions to participate in how we think about value. Even in the divestiture context, you might be able to sell something for a premium because it has been managed or run by a company that values compliance. So people aren't buying damaged goods or something that comes with a black cloud over it. And so that's a mindset, and that's some considerations that a deal team may not consider as they're thinking about divestiture. So those types of conversations happen over the course of time through, I'd say, that kind of regular dialogue.
Yeah, I would agree completely. Using that same approach, our M&A lawyers really are the conduit to our BD and CD&P teams on this point, and they hold routine and regular training sessions with them. And we, for our own internal sessions, right, our compliance team has hosted them for the entire legal team on these principles. And so then they'll just sort of flow down from there. But it's really fun to sort of listen on future deals where you'll see and hear your business development team say terms like, oh yeah, we have to be aware of the 180-day post-close sweep, or are they GDPR compliant? And you're like, wow, this is working and the message is getting out. You need them to be able to issue spot, and the more you can get out in front of them and do that, the better.
Well, thank you both so much. We're up against time, but this has been tremendously interesting from my perspective, and I really appreciate you both, Ben and Nancy, for taking the time and sharing all of your insights. And I want to put in a plug for those of you that aren't following the comments. It looks like there is a Bella M&A Playbook Executive Summary document that's accessible in the Bella Member Hub, which sounds like it'd be a great resource for people to check out. So thank you so much.
Thank you, Stacey. Thanks, Ben.
Thank you. Bye.
Thanks, everyone.